The physiques that you see on a lot of your social media fitness influencers are really not realistic. And when I say realistic, they're not even realistic for the person who's presenting it. Hey, everybody, I thought I would chat with you guys and gals a little bit about this today. And when I have this conversation, I am in no way trying to promote mediocrity. I'm not telling you that you can't get a six pack. Anybody can diet down with time, lean enough to have a six pack. That's not what we're talking about. I'm talking about the level of leanness and things, and the physiques that you often see on social media are a result sometimes of extreme disordered eating. They're usually, oftentimes, in many cases, people who have very, very good genetics, way above average for certain physique traits. And the vast majority are going to be using significant amounts of PEDs and different things to change their physiques. And on the latter, I think a point that people need to note when you really talk to a lot of the guys, it's not unless they're relatively big. It's not that they're using steroids and other gear. It's oftentimes the fat burners. It's oftentimes the stimulants. It's the things that suppress appetite, because really, for most people, that is where they run into the hardest part. Unless you're someone who just has a low appetite and a high energy output, again, what you think of as the traditional skinny guy, right? The hard gainer. Unless that's you, then the hard gainer is someone who struggles to eat enough. That's really and truly what they are. And unless that is you, this can become a problem. Like the actual dieting down is the most difficult part. And again, I'm not saying it cannot be done in a healthy manner. It absolutely can be. But what you find among particularly even the people who are putting out information, when you talk to them or see some of the stuff they've done, a lot of them have absolutely admitted they've run into almost mental breakdowns doing a lot of this stuff, getting lean enough for photo shoots or preps. So people need to be aware of that. Be aware of the fact that there can be a lot of disordered eating. There can be a lot of unhealthy behaviors. Again, people using a lot of different substances, sometimes legal, sometimes over the counter, sometimes not, to facilitate that level of leanness that they are trying to achieve. And just because they do that doesn't mean that someone else can't. And I think that's a take-home message with a lot. Is there are some people who getting leaner becomes very easy for them because they gained muscle and they work out and they were naturally skinny people. So for them, they're maybe eating more than they were eating 10 years ago when they were a really skinny guy. So just be aware of that. But for other people, particularly in our society, the way that we are addicted to our junk foods, we do see some very disordered patterns. And I recall a few over the years in fitness influencers either having almost mental breakdowns on camera in a dieting phase. We've seen some of you guys remember Brandon Harding when that happened. Gosh, what was that, 9 or 10 years ago? Guy pretty much had a mental breakdown on camera 3 weeks out from a bodybuilding show, had a mental breakdown because of all the stuff he was having to use plus the dieting process. He couldn't handle it anymore. It broke him. I've seen the same things where people, their diets are getting so strict that they almost can't function. So this is some of the methods, and people need to be aware of it. A lot of times it's not just real simple methods. Hey, I'll just follow a fad diet. Just like the example that Martin Berkhan Lean Gains approach, and it did work. And Martin kind of found his balance, but what he did was extreme. It wasn't that hard for him to do, and a lot of the people who followed him didn't find it particularly difficult, but there was a lot of discipline involved because it usually involved small feed windows, fasting all morning, and then eating extremely high protein, like 50% of your calories from protein. So that means, what does that mean? Well, if you're eating 2,400 calories, 1,200 of it is from protein. Okay, it's a minimum. You're talking even on lower calories like that. And for an really active male with muscle, that is fairly low calories. That's 300 grams of protein. People who are eating close to 3,000, you're talking 400 grams. All right. So essentially, it's filling up on things like protein. Filling up on things like protein to keep your appetite lower, keep the nutrient partitioning and thermic effect high, and then just not eating all morning. And depending upon who you ask, I personally think it's a very viable approach people can do. And I would say it's, even though it could be seen as a little disordered because it's that obsessive, but I've seen way worse. Okay, I've seen way worse approaches where people really want to do too fast and they go on almost just all protein, really low calories, and just cardio themselves into the ground. So we see a lot of that. So be aware that these physiques you're seeing when people are getting really lean and ripped, right? It's the strategies that they have to use to get there is difficult. We also see, again, a lot of fat burners being used that blunt appetite and stuff. Now that's become more socially acceptable, I think, with things like Ozempic and everything. More and more prescription stuff for these things, but that's not for people to get shredded. Those are being used for the morbidly obese. But we're at a point as a society where this has become normal and socially acceptable just to get down to even a healthy body fat of very expensive prescription drugs. So think about the extremes that people are taking to get down really, really lean. Living in that same society, in that same diet culture that we have here in America, what extremes do people have to go to, though, to get down so lean that you can see every vein running through their abs, right? And keep in mind, these body fats are not going to be sustainable. Again, I want to note, I'm not telling people they can't get lean. Okay? You can get leaner than I am right now and still be just fine for most people, right? I like to eat, so for me, cutting's a slow process. But we're talking that really, really shredded look. That is usually not sustainable. There's usually a lot of eating disorders and controlled substances involved to get to that point, with a few exceptions. But I would say almost everyone develops some disordered eating. Even the people I know who are natural. Even I know people I know who are bodybuilding and bikini prep coaches. They deal with a lot of psychological issues in their clients. So just be aware what you're seeing for the person to get to that extreme. It's not that the training they're doing, it's all the fat loss side of things can very quickly become unrealistic. So I would say to people, if you start setting those sort of goals, be aware it may not be as straightforward as you think. I'm just going to diet a little bit and everything's going to be fine, and I'm going to get ripped. Probably not going to be the case. Again, just be careful and be realistic about how far people go to reach these extremes. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I'll talk to you guys and gals next time.